Many pediatricians have come to me and said, well, are you saying that we should have a law against people spanking their children? As though this were an outrageous idea. In fact, we have laws against adults hitting each other, don't we? We call that assault. And in fact, it is assault when parents hit their children. Also, we are actually behind the animal activists in many ways in asking people not to physically strike their children. Would a law help? Well, it helped in Sweden. In the beginning, most people in Sweden, in fact, did not support or would not have voted for the law against parents hitting their children. And while they were confused and disjointed for a while, we now know that over a period of a decade, since then, 2 decades actually, since Sweden made it a civil offense to hit your children, the abuse rate has actually dropped, and the rate of children going into foster care, which you might expect as a possible consequence if people couldn't adapt to a new way of thinking, has gone down to almost zero. This is a challenge which we can meet. In this modern age of technology, there's no reason that people can't communicate on this subject and be able to really make a breakthrough in thinking in the United States on the subject of raising children.
Now, there is another very strong force in our country strongly against punishing children. And these are the scientists. These are the psychologists, the sociologists, the marriage and family counselors. These are people who either have done research evaluating different parenting styles, or they have experience as therapists dealing with families who have been destroyed by punishment.
As we move towards bringing up children less violently and ultimately someday to bringing up children non-violently, not hitting kids as a mode of discipline, that all the evidence suggests that that is going to reduce the level of crime and violence in the society, as well as reduce the level of mental health problems. That doesn't mean it's going to eliminate them, because crime and violence and mental health problems have many causes. Spanking kids is only one of those causes. In relation to the number of people it affects, it may be the most important cause.
Children learn from modeling the behavior of their parents. So the intention, no matter what anybody says, and I'll never buy this any other way, the intention of hitting a kid is not to get their attention. The intention is to inflict pain, because you can get their attention in lots of ways. So what you're doing basically, when you are hitting a kid, you can euphemize and call corporal punishment spanking. What you're doing is inflicting pain. Inflicting pain is a form of violence. So the basic message is, when you're hitting a kid, you're teaching him violence. And I consider spanking of young children the cradle of violence in our society. That's where a child first learns that somebody who loves you can hit you, cause pain, can do an act of violence, because hitting is an act of violence. By law, if it was an adult doing that, it would be assault. So the whole point is that you're teaching violence, and no matter what people who believe in biblical chastisement and hitting with love and not losing your temper. The fact is, most parents do lose their temper when they hit their kids, and the kids get that message. So it's basically an act of violence. You're teaching children that violence is a way to solve problems.
One of the unintended negative consequences of hitting children has to do with their moral development. Psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg, years ago, in studying moral development, conceived of it as a hierarchical set of stages, and the higher stages, the most advanced morality, had to do with internalized standards and individual standards of right and wrong. What happens when children are hit is that they learn to adjust their behavior to external consequences, and they rely on those consequences. And the argument has been made, and there is some evidence, that they never develop the internalized conscience that we tend to value among individuals and that we think is the basis of morality.
A study by Straus and Cantor of 6,000 families found that adolescents who had been physically punished were at higher risk for depression, for thoughts about suicide, for alcohol abuse, and they were also at greater risk for engaging in violence themselves, for engaging in spousal abuse and in beating their own children.
Who's more likely to be abused? Who's more likely to be hurt? And there, very clearly, the younger you are, the more likely you are to be badly injured or killed. The majority of child homicides happen to kids under 3 years of age, and of that group, the largest category are kids in their first year of life.
The Convention on the Right of the Child was adopted in New York on the eve of the 90s. This convention has been signed by 193 countries, which means 5 more than the members of the United Nations, who are only 185. It has been ratified by 191 countries. Only 2 have not ratified it. This means that it is perhaps the most universal of all treaties, of all conventions that have ever been signed, to demonstrate how much the international community, how much governments, how much people care about the children and their future. Yes, the convention definitely prohibits corporal punishment.
Is the reaction in the United States to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Every other nation in the world, with the exception, I believe, of Somalia, which has no organized government at this point, every other nation has accepted that convention. Now, why is the United States alone among civilized nations of the world not to join the convention? One major reason is that the convention explicitly protects children and gives them a right to protection from physical harm. So I do think we have to start by accepting as a society that it's never right to use violence against children. It happens, but it's never right.
We have really not been willing to have a good public policy debate around the legal issues of physical discipline and physical punishment of children in the home. So we need to recognize that those debates around institutional care of children have led to some understanding that the use of corporal punishment is harmful. And we need to take that experience of knowing that those debates have been helpful to children in those settings and move those debates into the area of what goes on in children's homes.